In yesterday's video, we broke down the high-end running backs for the 2025 NFL Draft. We had to make a second video on this class because there are so many guys, so many great talents, so many good names that are going to be available in the second round of rookie drafts this coming year that we decided we're going to go through our running backs 9 through our running backs 15 in today's video. If you missed yesterday's video, obviously go check out that one first to get the high-end dudes of this class. But we're going to be basically talking about the depth of this class and some of the guys that'll make up, like I said, your mid-rounds of your rookie drafts. There's a lot of good players still on the board. A lot of these guys would have ended up, top 3, top 5 running backs in this 2024 running back class. Obviously, we had a down year this year, but excited to get into these guys. A lot of them, I would say, are a little bit more at risk of like going back to school or maybe having down seasons or whatever the case is, but a lot of fun profiles to take a look at nonetheless.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we were talking about off camera. So for reference in this video, you guys, if you combine the top 8 from the last video along with this video, we will be talking about 16 total running backs. And it really feels like a crime talking about each of our RB16s as the RB16 in their respective classes. Because to be honest, in most classes, the RB16 this year would more than likely be the RB6, RB7 in other years.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're not going to waste any time. Let's start it off with our running back 9 consensus-wise. As we talked about in the other video, we went 8-1 because there was a little bit more of a build-up. We're just going to go 9-15 here because there's no reason to like go from 15 to 9 or 16 to 9. So starting it off with the top of this running back class in terms of the guys that we were watching and the guys that we broke down their profiles, we're going to kick things off here with Trevor Etienne, running back now of the Georgia Bulldogs, formerly of the Florida Gators. I looked at him. I mean, it's hard not to notice like his brother a little bit because Travis Etienne, Jacksonville Jaguars running back, was of a similar build. Both of them have good speed. Both of them, have this explosive nature to break through and run very decisively. I loved what I saw out of Trevor Etienne on his limited workload because unlike Travis, he hasn't been like the guy yet. He's been more of like 100 to 150 carry type of dude. Great burst, good vision, nice footwork, slightly undersized, like I said, but great contact balance even given that size profile. I think his run discipline needs a little bit of work, just like his brother early on in his career. He looks for the big play a little bit too much. He looks for the home run a little bit too much. I want to see him be the guy, but I'm not 100% certain that's going to happen at Georgia because they have Branson Robinson, who was a talented freshman, injured most of last year. I'm sure they're going to rotate their backs. Georgia always does. But like Travis, I think I also need to see a little bit more as a receiver too, because early on in Travis's career at Clemson, he wasn't the most, decorated receiving prospect, wasn't very good in pass protection. And of course, Travis played 4 years in college as a junior and as a senior. He got a lot better in those areas. So with Trevor, I like what I've seen on film so far. Explosive plays, great decisiveness. When he gets the ball in his hands, he can make things happen. But being the guy and developing more of a third down skill set are the things that he needs to work on. And again, I'm not 100% sure that's going to happen at Georgia.
Yeah, and it's so funny because we mentioned even in the 1-8 video that there's a lot of guys in this class that have the set production in years past, but also guys that on limited workloads show you a lot. And Trevor Etienne absolutely falls in the latter. The notes that I had listed down here, extremely shifty and agile in the open field, super creative runner. I mean, when this guy has the opportunity to make a play, instinctually, he always seems to be making plays, making people miss, finishing through contact. Like, he is one of the most creative runners in this class. Good size, consistent tackle breaker. I mean, this was a guy that recorded 4.08 yards after contact per attempt this past year, which ranked 4th amongst the class of the running backs that I watched. And the thing you notice, man, is he has absolutely elite footwork. Like, his feet are constantly moving through the play. He almost looks like a jitterbug when he has the ball in his hands, man. He's always scanning the field, always trying to find the lane, and those feet are constantly moving. Like you said, elite stop-start quickness as well are my strengths that I have listed for him. Weaknesses, pass blocking, a major concern at this point. Again, hopefully that can get cleaned up over in Georgia. The culture there, national championship winning type of team. He's going to have to set in and pass block for Carson Beck this year. Hopefully he can improve that part of his game. And I did say, like you said, the patience was good, but there were lapses in his vision at times. And the final note that I have here is, although he has good top end speed, he doesn't have his brothers.
No, he has a couple good comps that popped for him in the prospect model here. Ronald Jones, Kerryon Johnson, Miles Sanders, Devon Etienne, and Trey Benson are the guys that kind of pop for him as comparable prospects. Some of those guys were kind of limited workload dudes as well. When you think about Trey Benson never being the guy at Florida State or at Oregon, the schools that he played for. So Etienne's got a little bit of work to do in terms of, hopefully commanding the backfield this year. But again, Georgia is going to rotate their backs. They're probably going to use Branson Robinson, whatever other 5-star recruits they probably have on their roster. So with Etienne, my comp for him, I'm just curious. Like some of those guys actually do stand out as decent comps, like Rojo, Kerryon Johnson, those type of guys. My comp for him was actually Chuba Hubbard, because I think Chuba Hubbard was lacking a third down skill set, but was a very explosive runner, good speed, good footwork early on in his career. Suffered some injuries towards the end of his college career, and it kind of limited his film. Hopefully that doesn't happen for Etienne this year.
I actually liked his receiving skill set a little bit more. Again, limited sample size, but I thought when he was trusted in that role, he was actually good at it. My comp for him was Tyjae Spears of the Tennessee Titans. Similar players as runners, and I really do feel like if he can grind out that receiving aspect in terms of volume this year, again, limited sample size, thought he played well. If he gets a little bit more volume, I think he can really round out that part of his game. Ultimately, Etienne is one of the bigger wild cards in this class, because we can either look back, see he didn't progress at Georgia and think, oh my God, we had him RB9, that's too high. Or we can look back at the year. He is the lead back at Georgia. He really takes that next leap, and RB9 looks almost disrespectful.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't shock me at all if he had a monster season this year, because he's been playing for a program notoriously bad at using their talent. And maybe that's why he wasn't the lead back at Florida. Because with Pitts, with Tony, with all the guys that they've had in years past, they've not been using their guys to the fullest potential. And I do think that Etienne could explode this year. Branson Robinson coming off a major injury. Maybe they just decide he's going to be the guy for them. He's going to have 220 plus carries. He's going to have, 35 plus targets and round out his game to a better potential there. But Etienne I really wanted to put him in my top 8 just because of the flashes, what he does on film, but the profile has warts in it. That's why he's outside of my top 8.
Yeah, the exact same with me. Like if you just took all the profiles from this class and just strictly watched these guys play a game, Etienne would be definitely way higher up there.
Devin Neal, running back from Kansas, was a 3-year starter. So it was actually eligible to come out this year. Didn't end up coming out. He goes back to school, improved every single year of his career. And as we talked about with Damian Martinez and the other videos, you love seeing a freshman come in right away and start, improve as a sophomore, improve again as a junior. And with Devin Neal, he's improved both as a runner and a receiver all 3 years of his career. 29 and 31 targets the last 2 seasons. Hits most marks really in the model. When you stack him up, he kind of hits the mark in terms of commanding a workload, in terms of efficiency, in terms of athleticism and size. Compact build, great balance, refined vision, instincts, and toughness. He's really elusive too. I think that's probably his calling card, is that he's going to make you miss in a phone booth, as we've kind of talked about for some of these other guys. Better athlete version of Devin Singletary is what I wrote down.
It's funny you mentioned that, because my comp for him is actually Khalil Herbert, currently of the Chicago Bears. Who knows? Maybe by the end of the offseason, it might be running back of the Dallas Cowboys. Who knows? I didn't say it here. But all jokes aside, the strength of Devin Neal that I have listed down, 3 years of very good production, would have been a highly ranked back for me had he committed to 2024. And the thing that I noticed right off the bat, what jumps out to you, you can tell he's an experienced running back. He's a very cerebral runner between the tackles, understands leverage, understands tempo. And the thing that I love about him, like you said, is his feet are very active. He is not taking plays off. He's not getting lazy with his feet. He's keeping them active. He's staying patient. He knows when to tempo down. He knows when to speed up. He just knows how to play the running back position very well. And the best way I can describe Devin Neal, because again, like you said, the calling card there is going to be the active feet, is going to be the elusive ability, make you miss in a phone booth. But for the most part, I thought he was basically a jack of all trades, master of none. Other than that, like he's really, really good at a lot of things, but maybe he doesn't have the 4.3 speed of some running backs in this class. Maybe he doesn't have the insane power of some of these guys in this class. Maybe he doesn't have the elite receiving ability of some of these guys in this class, but he just kind of does everything well at a B+ or higher level.
Yeah, the comps that kind of pop for him, and he actually, according to the model, if he had gotten top 50, top 75 draft capital, it would have been neck and neck, him and Trey Benson, for RB2 in this class had he come out. So, Darrell Henderson is one of the names that pops here in terms of a 5'11", 215-pound back here. David Montgomery pops a little bit here. Royce Freeman popping a little bit here, as well as the other guys that I mentioned for Trevor Etienne, Miles Sanders, Rojo, Kerryon Johnson, and those type of guys. So when I look at Devin Neal, I kind of agree with you. I think he doesn't really do anything at a super extremely high level, but I like his game. I think he's a good player. And I think if we can get this guy with 3rd round draft capital or better this coming season, he could be a value. And similar to a guy like David Montgomery or Darrell Henderson, those guys had value early on in their careers. And Montgomery's obviously still a productive player now, just because they were relatively well-rounded.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I actually was able to get Devin Neal in our first Devy League startup that we did last year. And again, although I don't think he, like we said, has the highest of ceilings, I feel very confident he is going to be a very solid NFL running back for the longevity of his rookie contract, possibly on a second contract as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, David Montgomery type, Devin Singletary, a guy that people like to hate on, who's been productive most of his career. We could probably, yeah, exactly. We could pivot off of Devin Neal into another running back who we're a little bit divided on. But my model really likes him. So that's partially why I give him a little bit more lenience. And that's Jonah Coleman, running back formerly of Arizona, now of Washington, who transferred over there. He's big back, 5'9", 225 pounds, built like a literal bowling ball. I wrote down Mark Ingram immediately because that's just how he's built. That's how he plays. He's the type of guy that is really tough, hard to bring down in the open field. I thought he was a little bit stiff. I thought he had average athletic tools, kind of average burst, average acceleration, average change of direction, average long speed. So that's why I'm a little bit lower on him. I actually have him RB14. Danny has him inside his top 8 at RB6. But he has a compact build. He's physical. Like I said, pretty good burst, but probably not like elite speed. And then also, too, pretty underrated receiving production this past year. Another one of these guys, though, like Trevor Etienne, and the reason I didn't have him ahead of a guy like Devin Neal, even though I think there's certain parts of his game that maybe are more higher end than Devin Neal's game, is that Devin Neal's been a 3-year starter, been the guy all of his career, and Jonah Coleman has been split backfield the last 2 years. I guess you're more so projecting that when he goes to Washington this year, he's going to get the full workload. And I would say of the guys that we can say haven't been the guy yet, Jordan James, Trevor Etienne, those type of dudes, I do feel pretty confident knowing that Jonah Coleman's got not a whole lot of backfield competition there. And he should be the guy. Plus he has the size to do it. And like I said, he did have some underrated receiving ability in terms of what he did on film, as well as kind of what his numbers suggest. The only thing I have an issue with is that I don't think that the NFL will be super high on this guy because I do expect him to kind of test okay. I don't think he'll test super, super well.
Yeah, he's probably going to be a mid 4.5 type of guy. Like, we're not saying, oh, yeah, this guy's going to run 4.47. Like, I love Jonah Coleman. If he ran 4.47, I think I would shave my eyebrows off, to be honest, because that's just not going to happen. But the way I see him winning, like he said, is like a Mark Ingram, is like, the absolute high end I can see him potentially developing into is maybe like a Josh Jacobs, the way Josh Jacobs was coming out, a little bit of uncertainty with overall his touch volume at Alabama. We see at the next level the elusiveness, the contact balance, the refinement once he got to the NFL as a receiver. We really see that show off for Josh Jacobs. I can see that being the case for Jonah Coleman. The other one that I have listed here is kind of what everybody thought about Dameon Pierce after his rookie season. Not now, because obviously people are so anti-Dameon Pierce because everybody thinks he sucks because he had a bad year in the wrong running scheme for his skill set this year, playing in that zone running scheme for Bobby Sloak versus the gap power scheme he played the year prior. I view Jonah Coleman as kind of like what people wanted Dameon Pierce to be after that rookie season. Like you kind of alluded to, man, like I went into this film and I'm like, okay, Jonah Coleman, I expect, a big physical back, but I thought he had underrated wiggle for his size. Again, he's not going to blow you away with his agility. He is a 5'9", 225-pound back. But like Mark Ingram, if you just look at his size and you think he's not going to be able to make you miss in the phone booth every now and then, Mark Ingram was able to do that on a week-to-week basis when he was in the NFL. And that's what I see Jonah Coleman eventually projecting into at the next level. Strengths I have listed here, extremely efficient and physical between the tackles. Banger. Prototypical size to develop into a workhorse. Again, he's not a workhorse yet. I'm not saying that his past production is going to be what I'm basing it off of. I'm more so saying once he goes to Washington, I can see him developing into the workhorse there because like you said, he can play on all 3 downs. He can be your between the tackles grinder. He can be your third down back. And you said he was a pretty underrated receiver. Not only was he pretty underrated, 1.49 yards per route run this year and a 74.9 PFF receiving grade. That receiving grade would have ranked top 3 amongst the running backs I watched, up there with some of the best receiving backs in this class. Again, I'm not going to put him up there with a guy like Donovan Edwards or with a guy like Ashton Janty, but in terms of like an underrated part of his game, man, he graded efficiently in that regard. 93.4 PFF rushing grade, which is 3rd amongst the backs that I watched. The calling card, like I said, though, 5.09 yards after contact per attempt. Not only first in this class, but first by a country mile in this class. Like he was averaging basically 5.1 yards per carry after he was getting touched on a certain play. The single best tackle breaker, in my opinion, in this entire class when you're just relying purely on power. He's extremely proficient as a pass blocker as well. 72.6 PFF pass blocking grade, which ranks second in this class. And on top of that, he is the type of player that when you watch him, you just feel the physicality that he brings to the game. You feel the change of momentum that he brings to the football field. When he lowers his shoulder, when he finishes through contact, you see the energy that he brings to that offense. So I'm really excited. Him going to Washington now, him playing in the Big Ten, another step up in terms of the competition there, going from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, playing teams like Michigan, Ohio State, playing some of those big schools he will in the Big Ten. If he gets the workload that I think he will over in Washington, I have him at RB6 right now, and I really do feel like that's going to be a common sentiment after the season.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say on Jonah Coleman, just to wrap him up, it's pretty easy to be very efficient on your carries when you only get 140 a year. It's pretty easy to have a high receiving grade when you're not a full-time player and you have fresh legs. So if he is the guy this year, let's see how he stacks up from an efficiency standpoint, because, you said a couple things that I disagree with in terms of like contact balance. Like I'll take Judkins and Omarion Hampton easily over him in this class. Like, I don't know. He's got good tools. Don't get me wrong. He had good efficiency. That's great. Just want to see it result in more volume. And I also don't want to see his efficiency tank as a result of getting more volume, because that is more so the hard part. It's very difficult. And we don't have too many of these guys like Josh Jacobs who are efficient in college, not on a big workload, and come into the NFL and become workhorses. That's a rare case.
100%. And again, I'm fully admitting when I have him at RB6, that's more so projecting where we were going to have him going into the 2025 class. Because like you said, if you're just evaluating these guys based off the current day, the workloads that they've already gotten, the projection if they were to get drafted right now, he would be lower because, of course, he hasn't handled that workload yet versus some of the guys have. But like I said, once he gets that workload uptick in Washington, already rave reviews out of Washington saying he's a really good 3-down skill set, catching the ball out of the backfield. A couple of my buddies actually work with the Washington team and can confirm that Jonah Coleman is a guy that all the coaches are raving about. So I'm really excited to see him take that leap in terms of his workload this year, because I really do feel like I said, RB6 is going to be a common sentiment after the season.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens at the end of the year. Again, I'm a little bit skeptical because I feel like there's a lot of guys that are pretty solid projections so far. Again, Jonah Coleman ranks very highly in the model. He stacks up with guys like Dalvin Cook and Jonathan Brooks and Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry. But like I said, part of that is due to the fact that the model does account for efficiency more so than it does commanding a workload. So he did lose points in commanding a workload, but his efficiency was so great that it moved him up the board in terms of what the model thinks of him. So let's see what that looks like after his junior year. And if it continues, obviously I'll be all in on the guy too. And I do want to see him play a little bit more, because maybe he's also not playing super fast because he doesn't have a lot of experience. But if he is a great athlete and he's just playing a little bit slower because he doesn't have as much experience, maybe that'll change this year. Let's pivot over to Jadyn Ott from Cal, who is an analytics darling, according to the model. Basically, when you look at reception market share and, rushing yards over expected, another one of these guys that came in right away, started, was a lead back for his team. He's just a weird projection to the NFL because he's kind of lean, kind of upright, about 6 foot, 210 pounds, I believe he's listed at right now. The comp that I had for him is Raheem Mostert. Tony Pollard is also another one that I'm sure you might mention as well. He's a speed back, man. He's probably the fastest back in this class, or at least close to it. I think he'll run probably in the 4.3s. Him and Travion Henderson, I would say, were the two fastest guys that I watched. Zone running schemes are going to love this guy. I also think an underrated comp for him, a guy that we saw just last year, is Jalen Wright, but with like a better analytics profile, because Jalen Wright was more all film, a little bit thicker, a little bit more physical, but he had horrible analytics. And I think Jadyn Ott has this great foundation of his analytical profile to the point that if he gets a little bit bigger, if he adds a little bit more muscle and has a great season this year, great receiver, great production there, listed 210, but it looks like, honestly, he might be closer to 205 to 200 pounds just based on what I see when I look at this guy. But again, electric speed, great acceleration, hits the hole, decisive, great vision. It's just when you contact this guy, it's going to disrupt him quite a bit because he's not the most well-built running back in the world.
That's the issue I had with him. Again, very, very good receiver out of the backfield, especially as a true freshman. I believe he had 46 receptions. So very, very good production. Like we mentioned in this class, some guys don't have the production, some guys do. Jadyn Ott definitely falls in the latter portion. you mentioned I had 2 comps listed here, and Tony Pollard was one of them. If he can refine his rushing instincts, if he can refine the finishing through contact, making people miss. Because again, I do feel like he's solid in those areas right now, but he's not exceptional making people miss. He's not exceptional fighting through contact, like you said. I view him kind of on the spectrum between Tony Pollard as the high end if he can refine those rushing instincts. And the other guy I had him comp to, it's funny because I mentioned my Cowboy. I also see a little bit of Rachaad White to his game in the receiving game.
Yeah, no, that Rachaad White's not a terrible one too, because I think when you look at Rachaad White versus Tony Pollard, the reason that I didn't stick with Tony Pollard as the comp is I think he's faster than Tony Pollard for starters. Fair. And also I think Tony Pollard is more well proportioned and well built, even though they're of a similar size profile, or at least that's what his listed size is. It looks like he's a little bit more long and lean, and that's kind of how Rachaad White looked coming out of Arizona State. And also Rachaad White had that receiving profile that was very good. I mean, his target share coming out of school was like a 99th percentile number. And like you said, Jadyn Ott, 46 receptions his true freshman season, 26 receptions last year, even though he became the bell cow in the rushing game with 246 carries, 1,311 yards, and 12 touchdowns on the ground. So very good freshman year to start. Builds on it as a sophomore. Let's see another season of him building on it again. Because 6 foot 210 is the thing I'm worried about. Because I actually don't even think he's that big. I think he's like 5'11", 200 pounds or something like that. That's what he looks like to me. So size and how he progresses as a physical runner this year are going to be what I'm looking for. But I feel confident that if he does progress in those areas, he could look like a really good prospect with this profile.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. I would be shocked if he's 6 foot 210. Like, the guy looks like a receiver playing running back in terms of how lean he is.
Yeah, he almost kind of looked like a little bit like Jalen Hyatt, which is not a compliment as a running back, but just the way that he runs is also like very upright, and like he's not playing with very good pad level, and he's not lowering the shoulder very often. He's running by you or he's making you miss. And more often than not, he was trying to run by people, which he can do. And he's going to do at the NFL level too. I just worry a little bit that his profile is a little bit better than his film, because we've seen guys like this before. Like I think Zach Evans and, players like that, Sean Tucker come to mind, where their analytical profiles look great. But then when you watch the film, you're like, there's some warts to these guys' game. But right now, Jadyn Ott's film and, his analytics, profile kind of stacks up very favorably to that of like Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Brooks, those type of guys. But again, as a sophomore, if he can continue those numbers into his junior season, maybe add a little bit more muscle to his frame, then maybe he'll stay up there and he'll end up being a day 2 running back. But for now, I'm a little bit skeptical that the NFL is going to like this guy.
Yeah, no, and a lot of my notes relatively similar. Very good receiver to the backfield that offers alignment versatility. I saw a couple times they split him out wide. I saw a couple times that they would have him motion into the slot. Like they used him in a versatile way in the receiving game, which is what you want to see in college. Active feet with decisiveness in his cuts. When he does see the cut, he's able to get upfield very quickly. The problem though is, I thought his vision lacked at times. Like sometimes when he was behind the backfield and he couldn't quickly decipher where his cutback was, he kind of just got absorbed. Like he couldn't fight through the contact. He couldn't make someone miss in the backfield. He kind of just got absorbed up. So he is a very boomer bust runner, which is why I had the Rachaad White kind of listed here, where when the crease is there and he could put his foot in the ground, he can get vertical in a heartbeat. But when it's not there and he has to, wait it out, tempo a little bit differently, that's when you see him struggle. So that's what I got listed here. And the other one I got listed here is pass blocking is absolutely an issue at this point. I really do want to see him develop in that game going into the season.
Yeah. I mean, part of that was size related things as well. But with Jadyn Ott, a couple things to build upon, but a pretty strong foundation to his prospect profile so far. The next guy that we can get into is DJ Giddens, running back of Kansas State. First year as a starter this year, because Deuce Vaughn was there for a number of years and he was the lead back and the guy carrying the workload. I was really excited at first to watch DJ Giddens because the profile looks quite good on paper. I think he stacks up really well with Sony Michel, Darius Geis, J.K. Dobbins, Devin Neal, like we talked about from earlier in this video. Those guys were kind of in the same area. With DJ Giddens, I thought he had great hands, very capable route runner, great capable receiver. My comp, the first name I wrote down was Rachaad White. We talked about Rachaad White with a different player, obviously, but Rachaad White to me runs the exact same that DJ Giddens does. Only Rachaad White is a better athlete than DJ Giddens. I think that athleticism, burst, and speed were a bit of an issue for Giddens. I also wrote that he could play, but he might have day 3 tools. Like he's going to have a role in the NFL, but I'm not sure the NFL is going to value him super highly.
Yeah.
I think he's got smooth cuts, ball carrier moves, like all the things that you look for in a running back. It's just that he's going to run probably in the mid 4.5s, and he doesn't have the best frame either. He's kind of similar to Jadyn Ott in that way, where he's kind of a little bit more long, lean, and upright. I think the NFL values the Damian Martinez, Jonah Coleman types more because they know they can get me the tough yards, the goal line work, and that kind of stuff. Whereas DJ Giddens, you kind of need an idea of how you're going to use him a little bit more, because against NFL linebackers in the open field, he's probably hitting the dirt most of the time.
It's so funny you mentioned Rachaad White, because if you remember a couple weeks ago when we did our Smash These Players video, we were talking about Rachaad White in that video. Do you remember whose season I compared him to?
Kenyon Drake, who was my comp coming out of Arizona State for Rachaad White.
Kenyon Drake is my freaking comp for DJ Giddens. I think you outlined it perfectly. Again, when you look at the numbers, 89.6 PFF rush grade, 10th amongst the backs that I watched, 3.26 yards after contact per attempt, 13th, 40 10 plus yard run. So you can see the explosive nature to his game in that stat. 69 missed tackles forced per on his 223 carries, 1.29 yards per route run in 2023, which ranks 7th amongst the running backs I watched. I think you nailed it, because his listed size here is 6'1", 212 pounds. When I came into Giddens, I expected to see, a 212-pound back, a guy that can put his shoulder down, a guy that can finish through contact, but I just simply didn't see that. Again, one of my notes listed here is I'm a bit disappointed with the lack of physicality despite his frame. And he won with elusiveness rather than power. I would like to see him develop the power portion to his game. Again, the strengths for him, good size for the position, very productive this year as a first-year starter, active feet and very shifty for his size, very intriguing set of ball carrier moves. I felt the spin moves, the jukes, the jump cuts, all there in his game. He's able to vary them whenever he needs to in the open field. And the other thing, of course, very, very good receiver out of the backfield, versatility to be split out, run angle routes, not just a dump off running back. And the final note that I really was impressed about is typically with receiving backs, you'll see, again, a couple of these guys we've mentioned that have struggled in the pass blocking portion of their games. I thought DJ Giddens was a really good pass blocker.
Yeah, no, on third down, he's going to have a role. And
absolutely.
In the model, if you give him top 75 draft capital, which I think is a bit of a stretch, I think it's more likely that he's more of like a 4th round pick type of thing in the NFL, unless he vastly improves on some of his things.
In this class, too.
He literally stacks up exactly the same as Rachaad White as a prospect. So for me, Rachaad White's a pretty decent comp. And if you get him a little bit lower down the board, he's probably more so in that Kerryon Johnson, Kendre Miller, James Cook area. And I could see him kind of falling in that area. But again, he could fall to day 3 and he would be even probably a little bit lower than that. But I feel pretty good about his projection. I just don't know how the NFL is going to feel about him.
Sorry, I got to check this now, because I just saw where Kenyon Drake went in the NFL draft, and I'm curious. Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought you guys took Rachaad White 73rd overall, and obviously Kenyon Drake did go 73rd overall, because I'm like, okay, that would be like the higher end of DJ Giddens. Like if he was in a worse running back class, I can see him being his top 75 pick, but like you said, is it really palpable to think that the NFL is going to take like 15 running backs by day 3?
No, probably not. I mean, maybe because let's say a bunch of these 2017, 2018 running backs, like the Nick Chubbs, the Camaras, the Mixons, those type of guys start to fall off. And that's why the running back would need a big injection of youth at the NFL level. I think there's going to be probably 10 backs taken on day 2 this year, but I can't imagine DJ Giddens is one of those guys, given how I think he's going to test and given the lack of physicality that I saw to his game. It just doesn't seem like the type of running back that coaches will love. Because Rachaad White was a better athlete than him. So that's the difference between those two guys.
The difference is Rachaad White was a 4.41 guy versus Giddens, like you said, is probably going to be, if he's lucky, cracking high 4.4s, probably more so early to mid 4.5s.
I think early to mid 4.5s would even be a pretty good number for him. I didn't see a whole lot of acceleration and burst to his game. He broke off some long runs, but it was more so as a result. I think he anticipates well and he's got good vision and stuff like that. And I think that's what was able to make him create chunk plays. But when I watched him, he looked like Raheem Sanders in 2023 in terms of in his open field explosiveness, where I'm like, was he playing through injury or something? He was also a first-year starter this year, so it's possible he plays faster when he knows what he's looking at and he knows what he's doing. But he will be a senior this year too, so he's also not an early declare like these other guys. Yeah, so for reference, we've gone through Etienne, Neal, Coleman, Ott, Giddens. If you're following along,
I'll go through the order that I've had them in case you guys didn't catch that. I have Jonah Coleman as my RB6, Trevor Etienne as my RB9, Devin Neal as my RB11, Jadyn Ott as my RB12, and DJ Giddens as my RB14. What were they ranked for you again?
Devin Neal, the highest of the group we've talked about today, at 8, Trevor Etienne at 9, Jadyn Ott at 10, DJ Giddens at 12. In between those guys was Jordan James, who we talked about in the first video. So we got 2 guys here that are actually tied for us. I'll let you talk about your Michigan guy because you have him at 13, I have him at 16, and then there's another guy that I have at 13, you have at 16. So we'll talk about Donovan Edwards first, who didn't have a great season this past year, but was pretty solid in 2022.
Yeah, and having him at 13 is kind of acknowledging that you just kind of got to throw out the 2023 tape. Again, I used it a bit. Obviously, he would be higher if I was solely focusing on 2022, but he just looked like a completely different running back, and the numbers would back that up. 69.8 PFF rush grade in 2023 versus an 87.3 in 2022. 2.67 yards after contact per attempt in 2023, which was all the way up at 3.71 in 2022. But the one thing that was constant, even though his rushing grades significantly declined in terms of making people miss, in terms of finishing through contact, and ultimately his PFF rushing grade, is that he remained a very, very elite dynamic wide receiver, both in terms of versatility and both in terms of overall efficiency in the receiving game. 1.52 yards per route run in 2023, 1.49 in 2022, which would rank third amongst the backs I watched. And it's kind of funny because Donovan Edwards and the back that you also alluded to both play in the Big Ten and both kind of had the same strengths and weaknesses in the sense that we need to see them get back to their play as a rusher from 2022. Both are elite receiving backs. Both are hella explosive. But the thing is that their 2023 rush tape just simply wasn't there. And I mean, one of my weaknesses straight up I have for Donovan Edwards, you guys can get a laugh if you're watching right now, is sometimes I wonder if he has the vision of Stevie Wonder. He does not see the ball.
No, he does not. And he was a hard one to come up with a comparison for,
James Cook,
because the comp that I've written down, you know what? I actually don't like it. The guy that I wrote down was Chase Brown, but Chase Brown's intangibles were much better than Donovan Edwards. Sure. And but I think athletically and size wise, they're kind of similar, but they don't really have the same exact skill set. So, I mean, the model likes Roshan Johnson, Tajay Spears, Kenneth Dixon, Mark Walton, Darrington Evans type of guys. Darrington Evans is not a bad one in terms of the receiving skill set. James Cook, to me, I think would be a bit of a higher range of outcomes because I also think Donovan Edwards is destined to be like a 3rd or a 4th round pick unless he vastly improves as the starter this year. So he's another one of these guys where I could see him going kind of staying where he is, which is like a 3rd, 4th round talent, or potentially sneaking into round 2 if he has a great season as Michigan starter.
Yeah, like if you are a guy who flavors consistency on a down-to-down basis, guess what? You're not drafting Donovan Edwards. The reason why you would draft Donovan Edwards is because on any given single touch, again, the strengths that I have listed here, he can change the complexion of an entire game on a single touch. You get the ball in his hands in the right situation, 4th quarter against Ohio State, Michigan hasn't beat them in years. You put the ball into Donovan Edwards' gut and he's giving you a 75-yard touchdown. Next possession, he's giving you an 85-yard touchdown. He's got the type of breakaway ability to eviscerate second-level defenders' angles. Like straight up, when he is in the open field and when he can actually see the field instead of behind the line of scrimmage where he doesn't do that very well, God, he is just such an explosive natural athlete. When he has that runway, he gets a vertical extremely quickly, and he has great open field footwork. Again, behind the line of scrimmage, not a fan of his footwork. Once he's in the open field, it's almost like he's a completely different running back when he has that runway to go through. Again, underrated power, in my opinion, for his archetype, can absorb contact and finish runs specifically in the 2022 tape. And like I said, elite receiving back. I think he is the 2nd best receiving back in this class to Ashton Jeanty. And although he was relied upon as a change of pace runner with Blake Corum at Michigan, one of the pros I also have for him is he now has the new opportunity to really round out his full game as the lead starter for Michigan, a team that is going to be a top 5 team in the college football landscape going into the rankings this year, and a team that has national champion aspirations. If Donovan Edwards is the talent that I think he can end up coming to that he showed in 2022, he is going to be the engine of that team, and Michigan will run through Donovan Edwards.
Yeah, he's definitely got the best route tree of anybody outside of Ashton Jeanty. He ran very diverse routes in college. You don't really see college running backs run as consistently as he was out of the slot, out wide, wheel routes, Texas routes, all the stuff that he was asked to do is something that very few running backs are asked to do. I just worry that this is a committee back through and through at the NFL level, in
issue.
college. That's what I worry about with Donovan Edwards. And I guess we'll find out this year at Michigan if he can carry a workload in between the tackles. I personally don't think he can. I think that his contact balance inside the rushing lanes is a massive issue. I think that his vision, like you said, is a massive issue. I think in the open field, he can handle contact. In the open field, he knows where to go. It's when the play is muddy, he's not as comfortable as Blake Corum was, and that's why they played the roles that they did.
Yeah, sometimes you'll watch Donovan Edwards and you'll see the cut back there, and it's almost like he sees it, but he's hesitant to hit it sometimes. Like he kind of just waddles behind his lineman, puts his hand on his lineman's back and tries to create something that just simply won't happen there. Specifically a couple times in the Ohio State game. Again, an Ohio State game where he broke off 2 long touchdowns, but some of the other carries, it's like, well, you could have gotten the 4 or 5 that was right there. Why are you pushing, and only getting 1 on this play? Like you could just take that cutback right now and get a consistent 4 or 5, which is going to be more valuable on that play. The other thing that I had an issue with is he relies on a shoulder chop block way too often. Like I don't know why when he's in pass pro, he can't just square up guys. Like he has to just throw his shoulder, and sometimes he hits and sometimes he makes the block and sometimes he is laying on the ground and JJ McCarthy is getting rocked.
Yeah. And I think the reason we could transition right into Nick Singleton, who went to Penn State, obviously, but another Big Ten team that we're talking about here. I think the reason I favor Singleton over Edwards is because I think Singleton's ceiling is much higher than Edwards' ceiling is, because they're both great athletes. So it's not really an athleticism thing. I think it's because Singleton has the ability to command a 3-down workload and be a lead back as opposed to being a committee back. Like I think Donovan Edwards might be limited to at the next level. If Singleton can patch together some of these mental mistakes, and there were a lot of them on film, because I know people might be shocked that Nick Singleton is this far down the list because he was projected as potentially
number 1 running back coming out
class, right ahead of Quinshon Judkins and him back in their freshman seasons. We were super excited about these guys. But when I watched Nick Singleton, he was really mistake prone. He, as a punt returner, he was bobbling stuff. He was dropping passes. He was not where he was supposed to be when he was supposed to be there. Great speed, good receiving production, great freshman year, but his profile is kind of incomplete this year. And if he can bring it all together, I feel pretty good about him.
One of the cons I have here, it's funny you mentioned the kick return game, because obviously that was a big part of his game at Penn State as well, is that for a near 230-pound back, the fact that he's getting rocked as much as he is a concern for me. Like, dude, you're 226 pounds. Why are you getting absolutely flattened?
Yeah, he was kind of, him and Henderson were both the guys that it was like, dude, every single hit you take, you're squared directly up to the defender and they have a clean shot at your midsection. Like every single hit that Singleton took was like that. And 226 to me, I don't think he weighs that much. I think he's like probably 212, 215. I don't think he weighs 226 based on how he plays. Maybe he does weigh that much and he just doesn't play to it. He also was a very linear athlete too. I didn't think he was very laterally explosive, side to side, making cuts in and out of breaks of his routes or anything. I thought he was just like, he's one of those locomotives that once it gets going, it's like, it's going fast, but like acceleration. Like when I look at him versus Judkins, for example, Judkins 0 to 10 yards, I think would smoke Singleton, but I think Singleton runs a faster 40 than Judkins does.
100%. I mean, the pros are just straight athletic pros for here. Height, weight, speed freak, insane burst for his size, legit breakaway speed shown in spades as a true freshman. Like we're legitimately talking about a guy that once he was in the open field and he had that runway, he was scoring. Like it didn't matter if it was 20 yards out, if it was 5 yards out, if it was 50 yards out, he was getting that ball into the end zone because, quite frankly, he was just the best athlete on the field the majority of the games that they were playing at Penn State. He had great contact balance as a true freshman. Again, 4.58 yards after contact per attempt, which would have ranked second amongst the backs that I watched from his 2022 film. But the issue, like Donovan Edwards, is 4.58 in 2022, very, very good rusher, but he was a poor receiver that year with a 44.7 receiving grade, 0.6 yards per route run. I don't know how you just completely flip your identity in a year, because as a true freshman, you're a great rusher that can't really play on the passing game. But this year, as a true sophomore, you can't run the ball worth your life, but you're also an elite receiver. Like, just combine them.
Yeah, well, and hopefully the 2024 season is what happens. But Katron Allen, who's another running back there, is probably going to be involved in this offense. Yeah. My bet would be one of these two guys does not come out this year. I don't know if it's going to be Singleton or if it's going to be Katron Allen. Maybe it's Katron Allen because Singleton's the one getting the buzz because of the athleticism and that kind of thing. But yeah, we need to see Singleton put together, I think, just efficiency across the board, honestly. Like his best season, like rushing grades and receiving grades, they're just not that impressive. You know what I mean? Like I need to see him break more tackles, make more people miss, be more consistent down to down, stop dropping the ball, stop muffing punts, stop doing the mistakes that you don't need to do. I mean, there was a reason this guy was the 5-star best running back prospect in the class coming out in 2021. It's just we haven't, or 2022, whatever year that was. We just need to see him put it all together. And this year is the year he needs to do it.
Yeah, like one of my last notes for his pros. So first of all, like I said, in 2023, elite receiving back, efficient, versatile, explosive, split out wide, out of the backfield. Like he was really used as a good receiver this year, 1.57 yards per route run, which was second amongst the backside watch. The other thing I have listed here is you can consider this a pro. You don't have to consider it the pro. I don't care. What I want to do is add context here for the strength. Extremely talented. This is a former #1 overall running back who's still one of the youngest running backs in this class, who was elite in one aspect, but bad in the other as a true freshman, and elite in the other aspect and bad in the other as a sophomore. So I still have hope that that talent exists, that size exists. And if he can just combine both of those parts of his game this year, again, he's my RB16 because I have hesitancy thinking he can. But if he does, we're talking about a legitimate top 35 running back in this class.
I'm trying to think, like, what does he look like as a prospect if he puts it all together? You think Antonio Gibson?
Puts it all together?
If he puts it all together, what does he look like as a prospect?
Man, like I'm trying to think. Like
I think Travis Etienne was a name that came to my mind as like maybe that's what he would look like if he put it all together, rushing plus receiving game.
Etienne's a good one.
Yeah, I could see that because you need a guy who's athletic and who's going to break. Like, I think another one that kind of makes sense if he is 226 is like Rashad Penny potentially too.
Yeah, that's a good. Oh, Rashad Penny's a really good one. I like that a lot.
But Rashad Penny was way more physical though. That's the difference I think I see between those two guys. Either way, if Singleton can put it all together, he's going to be a great prospect. But right now, if people are pretending and
what's your current call?
RB2 in devy drafts because he's this complete prospect already, he is absolutely not a complete prospect yet.
Well, what was your comp? Because I already alluded to mine, but mine's Antonio Gibson.
I couldn't come up with one. This was the one guy I could not come up with a comp for.
Really? Okay. I mean, if you want, you can take the Antonio Gibson with me because I mean, 4.39 speed.
Gibson's not a bad one for sure. Yeah, because he's got the size and the athleticism like Gibson, and obviously Gibson didn't even play running back in college, so he didn't really have it all put together. And you mentioned too, Gibson's a guy that made a lot of mistakes at the next level, and that's kind of cost him his job in Washington. So yeah, it's not a bad one for sure.
For sure. But the last back that we do have here, again, we went through, for reference, if you guys are keeping count, Donovan Edwards, my 13, Nicholas Singleton, my 16. Just reverse for Corey. Corey has them. Singleton, 13, Donovan Edwards, 16. The last guy we have is both of our 15s. Just honestly, to me, I think he's a worse version of Jonah Coleman.
Yeah, and I would push back a little bit in some areas because I think as a receiver, he's definitely a worse version of Jonah Coleman in terms of the receiving skill set he has. But Tahj Brooks, running back from Texas Tech, 5'10", 230 pounds, rocked up, dude. Absolute tone setter. Great in between the tackles runner. I think he's a very experienced guy. He's going to be going into his 5th season in college. So he is a lot more experienced than some of the guys that we've talked about so far, but it shows. It shows in his game. He knows how to run the football, has great vision. I thought he was a great anticipatory runner too, able to kind of see when rushing lanes were opening up. Through contact, he worked very, very well. He wasn't the type of guy to get disrupted by contact at all, to be honest. We talked about Jonah Coleman's on your devy team. Tahj Brooks is on mine. So we're kind of going back and forth on guys that we have on our respective devy teams. But for me, Tahj Brooks is a guy that is a prototypical 3rd, 4th round running back that gets a workload because he knows how to run the football. He's probably not going to ever contribute a huge 3rd down workload. I don't think he's going to develop it as a 5th-year redshirt senior this year out of the blue, but he got better every single year as a runner. And I feel confident that an NFL team is going to take him in the 3rd, 4th round or whatever, and give him an early down workload if he can earn it in an open backfield.
Yeah. It's funny enough, the other comp I also thought of. So I talked about it pre-show with you, the comp that I had for Tahj Brooks. And again, I explained it and you said you knew it. Do you know who I was talking about?
So I don't know for sure because you made like a little baseball swing thing. And I was like, I thought it was Austin Eckler at first, but that makes no sense skill set wise. And he does the air guitar thing anyway. Is it J.K. Dobbins? Didn't J.K. Dobbins do that?
No. We're talking about, so this is a throwback, 2012 NFL draft.
Doug Martin.
No. Later round pick that ended up being a really solid NFL back.
Trying to think. Giovanni Bernard? No, that was 2013.
Bigger.
I don't
Big
know.
back.
Yeah, I give up.
Alfred Morris.
Alfred Morris. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a nice one. My comp for him was like Ray Rice, but like a worse receiver. I also wrote down Tyler Algier as one for Tahj Brooks because I think size-wise they're like exactly the same dimensions. But I think Tahj Brooks had a little bit underrated explosiveness. Like Algier ran a 4.60 at the combine. I think Brooks can crack the low 4.5s.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's more of a high 4.5 guy personally, but I do feel like in terms of his wiggle in the open field, similar to Jonah Coleman, these backs move a lot smaller than their listed weights. Like Jonah Coleman, 225-pound listed weight. Tahj Brooks, 230-pound listed weight. But when you watch them in the open field, like they got underrated wiggle. They can move side to side. They can make people miss. That's what I was surprised about because typically when you see these older backs, like they look sluggish. You could tell that all they rely upon is their physicality. But I was pleasantly surprised that the bigger backs in this class can fucking move. With Tahj Brooks, I have listed here absolute hoss between the tackles. He's built like and plays like a tone setter, has a desired build to be that workhorse between the tackles and on the goal line, projecting it to the next level. Tough as nails, very, very productive on the ground this year, and he's an extremely good pass protector. The weaknesses that I have here, again, I thought his long speed was a little bit worse than you made it out to be personally. I thought he's more so a low 4.5 guy. If you have him as a high 4.5 guy, that's fair. That was my concern. Long speed just isn't there for me. No real creativity as a runner. Like he's a very, very good structured runner, but I didn't think he was the most creative, especially compared to some of the backs in this class. And even though he had the production, he's a zero in the receiving game. Like he averaged 3 yards per reception. He was at 0.23 yards per route run in 2023. He peaked at 0.67, I believe, in 2022. If you're drafting him, just know you're getting more so a 2-down skill set. And that was really the big difference for me between him and Coleman is that I think Jonah Coleman has a 3-down skill set to potentially become a first, second, and third down back in the league. I didn't really see that receiving skill set in Tahj Brooks. Again, I think he can be a really good pass blocker on third down. We need him to just stay in the backfield, protect your quarterback. He can do that. He's very, very good at protecting the quarterback. But when he's actually asked to handle a route tree, I don't really trust him.
Yeah, Gus Edwards, Brian Robinson are two guys that pop for him in the model as well, which that's assuming he gets day 3 capital. If he got day 2 capital, he'd be more so in the David Montgomery kind of Royce Freeman area. But I think it's possible that he's an early day 3 pick. And, you know, you're hoping for Dameon Pierce's rookie season, or you're hoping for Brian Robinson early on in his career, or maybe the production that Gus Edwards has given you. So Tahj Brooks, a guy that I don't disagree with you. I have Jonah Coleman rated ahead of Tahj Brooks. So I still think Jonah Coleman has more upside. But I feel confident saying that Brooks is like a good player who can play at the next level.
For sure. But yeah, no, I still keep remembering, for the record, with Alfred Morris, he was a 6th round pick in the 2012 draft. And I mean, obviously you guys know his rookie season, but he had a couple years after that people don't really credit. He had another 1,200-yard year after his rookie year, another 1,000-yard year. The year he played in Dallas in 2017, he was averaging 4.8 yards per carry on a limited workload. Like people think Alfred Morris, slow, grinder back, pretty boring, but like these guys are just productive. And the other guy I actually thought of too was Zach Moss.
Yeah, Zach Moss is actually a really good one. I think that one makes a lot of sense. So yeah, number of comps listed for all of these guys. And we've been kind of showing how they stack up in this video in the prospect model. And I'm probably going to write up all these guys in terms of their overall comps based on what kind of draft capital they're expected to get and that kind of thing. So stay tuned for that. Of course, if you do play Dynasty Fantasy Football, you need to be checking out flockfantasy.com. Over there, we have our Dynasty trade value chart. We have all of our Dynasty rankings, Superflex, 1 quarterback, tight end premium, all that kind of stuff, rookie rankings if you're still doing rookie drafts, as well as we'll probably have a batch of like 2025 rankings and stuff drop to the site. And of course, once the best ball season's going and we have best ball rankings up already, the redraft rankings will be up very soon. So if you guys are Dynasty players, definitely check out flockfantasy.com. The running back prospect model, the wide receiver prospect models are both on the site. Next week, we'll be tackling some wide receivers and talking about this class. It's a little bit more digging that you have to do at that position versus these guys are plainly obvious good running back prospects.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the reason why we're doing 15 running backs, 10 receivers, and 5 quarterbacks is probably what we'll end up doing is that the identity of this class is in the running back position. The identity of 2024, like we know, was in the wide receiver position. So just knowing inherently that this is a strong running back class we got to get you these names out. We're not just going to say, oh, we don't like running back, so therefore we're only going to do the top 10. We're going to do the top 15 wide receivers because we like wide receivers better. Like, no, like we will detail and outline them based off the strength in this class. And for reference, like I just said, the difference between our RB16 for me and RB6 is separated by 7 grading points.
Yeah, exactly. This is the type of class that if you guys are doing startups right now, going a 1-year punt makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Because if you get a lot of 1s and a lot of 2s in next year's class, you can build out a nice foundation of wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends in the startup, and then add your running backs next year because we got a nice group of backs coming in to the NFL. So that is definitely going to be a strategy. We'll probably talk about like rebuilding strategy, house money strategy, contending strategy in the next couple of weeks or so as we gear into the fantasy football season starting in July when, you know, training camps open and all that kind of stuff. So if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, comment down below any of your thoughts, subscribe to the channel. If you're new, make sure you check out tomorrow video as well for the running backs 1 to 8. If you guys missed that, you're definitely going to want to check that out. But with that being said, peace out and we'll talk to you soon.